Tonight, we're coming to you from Chevron's Anchor Floating Production Unit, about 140 miles off the coast of Louisiana. This new platform is designed to produce 75,000 barrels of oil per day. More important, it can maintain pressures of 20,000 pounds per square inch, which could unlock all sorts of offshore oil sites that were pretty much previously inaccessible. But don't take it from me. Earlier today, we got the chance to sit down and discuss this project with Mike Wirth, the chairman and CEO of Chevron. Take a look. Mike, we are on Anchor. To me, it seems like an engineering marvel, a technological marvel. How do you get it done?
Well, it takes time. We started 20 years ago when we first acquired a lease out here 140 miles offshore. 10 years ago, we made a discovery with a well from a drill ship. 5 years ago, we had enough engineering done to make a final investment decision. 5 years later, and over $5 billion of investment, here we are. So it takes time. It also takes every engineering discipline you can imagine. Marine engineering, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, petroleum engineering, chemical engineering, coming together with the world's greatest suppliers to integrate these systems. It's like a small city out here. We've got to be self-sufficient. It'll be here for decades, and I'm really, really glad to host you.
Okay, I've been on platforms before. I don't smell any oil. It seems self-contained. It seems low carbon. How's that possible?
Well, our goal is to keep everything inside the pipe. In the old days, when you could smell things, it was because there were vapors getting out of the pipe. That's not acceptable today. It's not acceptable for our company. And so you got to keep things inside the pipe. It's clean as can be. It's some of the lowest carbon intensity production in the world. The average carbon intensity for oil production is around 60 kilograms per barrel of oil, or 60 tons per barrel of oil. This is about 5. So it's low carbon intensity. There are no emissions. Nothing goes overboard into the water other than very clean water, and that's the way we operate. All
right, so tell me something. I got some of your crude right here. I buy a gallon of milk in New York City. It's $5. Paying $3 at the pump. All you got to do is milk a cow, put it in a carton, heat up the milk, and you got it. And they charge $5. How are you able to? What does it take to get it there in my pump, and how can you only charge $3?
Well, it's a global market for crude oil, and we've got to be efficient with our capital investment. We've got to be efficient with our operations, and frankly, the industry's got a history of finding a way to do things better and better, which continues to drive the cost down, which allows us to compete in the marketplace. And prices, really, if you look at them over a long sweep of time and you adjust for inflation, they really haven't gone up very much. And so it's all about continual improvement and efficiency in an industry that is a highly competitive industry.
All right, so tell me about this facility in particular. What costs more than $5 billion? It's got many levels. Where's the oil from here?
Well, the oil's coming from a few miles that way. It's going to come from a few miles that way. This is a big field. It's a field that's several square miles. We put a facility here. We have different drill centers on the seafloor, a mile beneath the surface of the ocean, and then we'll drill wells that reach out laterally from there, another mile, 2 miles. It all gathers along pipelines on the seafloor, and then we bring it up here. The ship that drills these wells, first of a kind, we worked with Transocean to work at 20,000 pounds per square inch, which is the reservoir pressure.
How much pressure is that? Give me, like, how many pianos on a table? How many Caterpillar trucks on a table?
So imagine a full-grown male African elephant standing on a quarter. That's what the pressure is down in this reservoir. We've got to drop the drill pipe and pull drill pipe in and out of the whole 35,000 feet down. The ship can
taller than Everest.
That's taller than Everest. It's about the cruising height for a commercial jetliner. 3 million pounds is the hook load on the crane, which is essentially equivalent to that crane on a ship out there lifting 3 fully loaded 747 airplanes.
All right, so how can it be worth it? How many net barrels do you think are in this? How do you justify spending that money, especially when I know that we like Chevron for the dividend?
Well, we've got several 100 million barrels that we expect to produce out of this field over 30 years. So we take a long view on recovering our investment, which is a large investment. It's got to generate a return and got to generate positive cash flow. because the dividend matters to our shareholders, and we've got a strong track record on that dividend.
Now, I just on the stock in general, I find it's been held back because you're doing something with Hess. That's under arbitration. We can't tell when that's going to be resolved. But it has hurt the valuation of the stock, even though I think if you get it, stock should go higher. And if you don't, you can do conventional because your conventional is strong.
Well, look, our portfolio was very strong before we did the transaction with Hess. We had a great growth trajectory. Over the next several years, we're going to grow free cash flow at a 10% compound annual growth rate, which is what supports the dividend. Our dividend yields over 4%, which is 3 times the S&P. We've grown our dividend for 37 consecutive years. The last year's at a 6%, last decade at a 6% compound annual growth rate. So we're returning cash to shareholders over the last 2 years, dividend and share repurchase, more than $50 billion back to our shareholders.
Okay, I appreciate that. Our viewers appreciate that. Mike, there are people, look, Macondo was bad, and we all know it. It's a long time ago now, but what do you say to people who say, you know what, you can't really mitigate the damage here. There's nothing they can ever do. Offshore is just too dangerous.
Well, look, the Macondo incident was a horrible incident, and I think everybody in the industry recognizes that and has learned from that. So we operate at a much higher level of safety even than we did back then. Thank goodness our company's not experienced an event like that, but it could happen to anyone if we're not as diligent as we could be. So we pool resources to be prepared to respond to an event, but we've also raised the bar on the standards for our drilling operations out here in the deepwater Gulf of Mexico. And at the first hint of a problem, you shut down and you go to a safe state.
All right, now on this platform, it seems like I see many, many people. How many did it take to build? And how many people are here, live here, sleep here, or go to the gym here?
Well, it took thousands of people to build this. It was built in more than a dozen countries around the world, and the pieces then come together. The equipment comes from suppliers around the world. The hull that we're floating on was done in a shipyard in Korea. The topsides were done in Corpus Christi, Texas. It's all integrated and then brought out here and anchored up, and so thousands and thousands of people over many years. Once we've got it installed, it's run with a pretty efficient crew. We've got maybe 100 people on board at any time. They work 14 days on, 14 days off. Typically when they're on here, it's 12-hour shifts, 12 hours on, 12 off. We're 24/7 back to back. So it's a relatively lean crew that runs it, but it's like a small city.
All right, so a lot of people, we had 2 hurricanes, people worried about hurricanes. What can you tell people about this under the extreme conditions that could happen?
Well, certainly when there's a hurricane, we evacuate our facilities if there's any risk that it could be hit. We shut in the production. We take everything to a very safe state. The facility is designed for a 1,000-year storm. We've got 80 to 100 feet of freeboard between the surface of the water and the first deck on the platform. So we can take waves that are much higher than you see, and even a Category 5 hurricane that just wash right underneath here. So it's designed to withstand more than the biggest storm that you would see here in the Gulf of Mexico, but we get everybody off and take it to a safe state when there's a storm in the region.
Excellent, Mike. We're going to be back with more of my talk with Mike Wirth, Chevron, in a moment.
Coming up, Jim Cramer is diving deeper into the heart of the Gulf with more from his exclusive interview with Chevron CEO Mike Wirth from the company's anchor platform 140 miles off the coast of Louisiana. Next.
Before the break, you saw the first part of our interview with Chevron's chairman and CEO Mike Wirth at his impressive anchor floating production unit off the coast of Louisiana. But I didn't agree to fly out to the middle of the Gulf of Mexico for just a few minutes of this time. Man, I learned so much from this CEO. Take a look. Mike, you spent a fortune on anchor. What it says to me, this is a long-lived facility. You must believe that fossil fuels will be around for a long time. Aren't you concerned about EVs? Aren't you concerned about the future of what's going to happen to fossil?
Look, the demand for energy in the world continues to grow. The population grows. The number of people in a middle-class lifestyle grows. We need all the solutions to meet that growing energy demand. EVs are great for people that can afford them and that have driving patterns that fit. They don't work for everybody. I mean, last year in the U.S., we saw the biggest year of EV sales ever, about 1.5 million EVs. There were 10.5 million internal combustion engines sold last year in the U.S. If you look at the entire fleet in the U.S., there's about 5 million EVs on the road. There's 260 million internal combustion engines on the road. So it's a long cycle here. And of course, our products are used in much more than just gasoline, which is maybe 25 to 30% of where a barrel goes. The rest goes into aviation, long-haul trucking, shipping, marine uses, petrochemicals. And a lot of those become the composite materials that go into an EV because they make lighter weight structural components for things like EVs. So the demand for our products is going to be with us for decades to come.
All right, so when Elon Musk said yesterday that you're going to be a niche industry, it doesn't sound like that's anytime soon.
Look, there's room for all of it. We're going to need all of it, and I want to see every solution that is economic and feasible come to bear. We're going to need all of those.
Now, oil and gas industry is in ascendance. We're the biggest producer in the world. You've had a big role in it. How did it happen that we became ascendant, the number one producer in the world?
Well, it's the innovation of the U.S. industry. I mean, we were, if you remember back in the early 2000s, declining production. Yeah. We were watching other countries like Saudi Arabia and Russia really grow, and people thought forevermore. You heard talk of peak oil, and there was not going to be enough. It's innovation. In the U.S., it's been in the Permian and other unconventionals with horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing. The U.S. is now producing over 13 million barrels a day. Saudi Arabia and Russia less than 10. So the U.S. is the biggest producer. Capital markets, innovation, great companies, and it's made America energy secure once again. Speaking
of great companies, we've got companies like we have Amazon, we have Meta, we have Alphabet, we have Tesla. These are companies that need more power than they seem to realize, correct?
Well, you know, electricity demand in the U.S. is going to go up again. It's been pretty flat for some time, but the electrification of the economy, including electric vehicles, and the growth in data centers to support all the technology that we're seeing is going to need a lot more electricity generation. Natural gas is really competitive for reliable baseload power, which is going to be essential. So we'll see wind, we'll see solar, we'll see renewables come in. But we're going to also see a very strong role for natural gas, which the U.S. is blessed with an abundant supply.
We spent a lot of time talking about domestic, the geopolitical situation for you. Kazakhstan, a part of the old Soviet Union, war with Ukraine, Leviathan, off of Israel, Middle East tensions. Got to be. How do you live with that?
Well, it's a part of our world every day, the geopolitics, and you've just named some of the areas where we've got significant operations. We've got people that work just as hard as the people on this facility every day to keep our people safe and keep the environment protected, keep our assets, in a state where we don't have an environmental incident. And then, of course, we work with the intelligence services, our own and those of countries, to be sure that we understand the risks in the environment and we properly mitigate against those risks, particularly in the zones where we've got conflicts underway.
Okay, so we do have an election coming up, and there is the law. This took forever to build. I know you can't be thinking about who's going to be president, who's not, if you're taking a long situation, but in January 26th of this year, the Biden-Harris administration announces temporary pause on pending approvals of LNG exports. You've got projects that can't have that happen. Do you care who is going to end up being president as the CEO of Chevron?
Well, it's an interesting point. This facility, from beginning to end, has spanned 5 different administrations. It's going to be in service for more than 30 years, so it will survive 5, 6, 7 more administrations, and we'll see the White House go from one party to another. What really matters is consistent and coherent energy policy. And frankly, that's something we've not seen as much of out of this administration, including the LNG permitting pause, which sends a signal to our allies that look to us for LNG supplies. We've helped Europe in a time when they really needed the help. People look for long-term commitments out of this country, and short-term moves that question whether or not we will be able to invest don't help with the global supply situation.
You know, people who give fossil fuel, that's got a bad rap, but at the same time, what you've done and your industry has done has made us independent. I remember 1973. I remember the day of the Yom Kippur War. That was the beginning of a round of inflation, the beginning of a huge recession. beginning of the lost decade of the 70s. That can't happen again because of your industry.
Well, energy is such a vital part of the global economy that if we find ourselves in a situation where energy supplies are constrained, particularly if they're constrained by political actions, it can trigger inflationary reactions in the economy, because the price of energy is embedded in everything, because everything is delivered, everything's manufactured, and energy is the lifeblood of the economy. So affordable and reliable energy is essential to keeping inflation at a level that economies can handle, and that's why we need investment and we need stable policy to encourage that investment.
Does the U.S., either party, understand and do enough to support this industry, or is this industry not in the room?
I think there are a lot of people I talk to in Washington from both parties that do understand this. Oftentimes they tend to be from states that are energy producers, and so they understand the industry better. But I do find people on both sides that understand it. They can be pulled in different directions for various reasons. We try to work with both parties. We're apolitical. We want to see people elected to office that believe in free markets, that believe in competition, that believe in the economic vitality of this country, and that's something that is not a domain of only one party or another.
Right, the one thing that does concern me, I see these what seem to be on paper brilliant carbon capture programs, again, to try to lessen your footprint. But Mike, they're not working. They're expensive. They're going wrong. What's the big plan to mitigate?
Well, they are expensive. One of the big challenges is there's not a price signal. And a price signal is really how markets respond, and capital flows in response to that. Capturing carbon is all about costs right now. And so we've got some tax incentives that the IRA brought in, which start to create an economic signal to build these businesses, but they're new businesses. They're entirely new value chains. And so you've got customers, you've got service providers, you've got investment, and you've got to figure out how to allocate capital risk and returns across these new value chains, and the investments are going to be at the measured in the billions, and so that takes time, and that's what's underway right now. We're working hard on. A lot of other good companies are working hard on it, but it doesn't happen overnight.
Well, Mike, I think you do take a long-term view, and I think everybody appreciates that, particularly shareholders. I know it's hard to allocate. I know it's hard to be able to be a CEO of an oil company in this world right now, but I've been behind you all the way, and you paid a lot of money out to people. Got to get the stock higher. You know that.
We're going to get the stock higher. The cash flow is coming. 2025, we're going to go from, over the next 2 years, in the Gulf of Mexico, 200 to 300,000 barrels a day, 1 million barrels a day in the Permian. We're going to get to 1 million barrels a day in Kazakhstan. We've got big production growth coming. That's going to drive cash flow growth, which is going to continue to support growth in the dividend, share repurchases, on top of a strong balance sheet. We've got a strong value proposition.
That will do it. Mike Wirth, Chairman and CEO of Chevron. Thank you so much, Mike.
Thank you, Jeff.